The glamorous wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana in 1981 was a powerful symbol of love and marriage. Yet their subsequent divorce showed that in modern Britain, it was individual choice, not social convention, that determined whether a marriage survived.
I had huge expectations of what married life was going to be like, and it very quickly felt extremely disappointing. I had the wedding that I wanted, I had the husband that I wanted, but I didn't have the friendship.
With divorce an everyday reality for 1 in 3, remarriage offered new hope for lasting love.
I think the final realisation for Lynn was when I got down on one knee and presented her with that ring, is this guy's serious. This guy's not mucking about. This guy's committed to this and he wants this. Because the answer was no, the relationship was over.
I got lucky.
But what if you came to England and met me and I was an absolute harridan?
Oh, I learned that later, dude. But no, I mean, that you deal with.
That's the answer to the question of why a marriage works. Because you deal with things.
This is the story of 5 couples who struggled to hold on to romance in a world where marriages are as easy to end as they are to start. All would be pushed to the limit. Welcome to marriage in the age of divorce. Couples coming of age in 1980s Britain looked to the future in a society with greater individual choice than ever before.
Though I live on the edge, time is on my side. All the doors to my life are open wide, just as long.
A new generation of young women were now using their education to win more opportunities in the jobs market. Their growing financial independence gave many a very different expectation of marriage to their mothers.
I can feel it, living it up, is it a crazy notion? Living it up.
Working-class girl Lynn Warren had grown up in the shadow of Swan Hunter's shipyard in Wallsend, Newcastle.
I used to go out on weekends and chat to fellas. And when I was growing up and, like, you know, finding the wrong ones, I used to think, oh, you're right, wimp, you know, go away. I don't like you young boys. And then I think they must have been frightened of me, being so independent in my own job and my own money. I'm all right by myself. I'm just enjoying my life. I don't want to be tied down.
In the early 1980s, change was in the air. As young women established themselves in careers and on the shop floor, there was a shift in some men's attitude towards domestic chores and childcare. Liberated new men and new fathers began their marriages with high hopes. Divorce was the last thing on their minds. In 1981, David Robertson was a recently married vicar at St George's Church in Ovenden, North Halifax.
My wife took a career break to have our first child. We then followed up with our second child, and as we got into the swing of it, we followed up with our third child, and as we were now pretty good at it, we then finished off with our fourth. And I believed very firmly then that it is appropriate for fathers to be as involved in the upbringing of the children as mothers. Because I was by that time a vicar and able to plan my own day, it enabled my wife to return to work and to concentrate on work. It enabled me to develop a relationship with the children also. We both felt that it was a good way of modelling family.
Change was also happening within Britain's ethnic communities. Many second-generation sons and daughters were forming their own ideas about love, in defiance of the arranged marriages expected by their parents. At the age of 8, Mo Chowdhury's family moved from Pakistan to Luton. By 1983, he would be studying sport at the Polytechnic in Stoke.
In the age of 15 to 18, I started to change a lot. I became very much non-cultural, very much westernized. All my friends were English. So it kind of opened my eyes up to the bigger world, really, and I realized that actually I wanted to do things with my life and do my own thing. There was kind of talk about marriage, and of course, generally, the Asian culture is that you marry, it's an arranged marriage with somebody within the extended family. Although I don't recall saying to my mum and dad, no, I'm not gonna have an arranged marriage, I think they could tell from my body language that I was a little bit different.
A night out clubbing was a popular way to find romance, and more young people were finding love across the racial divide. Architectural engineer Anne Fishwick grew up in the Potteries. After one February night out in 1983, her life would never be the same again.
I met Mo at a local nightclub that's no longer in Stoke-on-Trent called The Place. And he was actually bouncing there. He was a bouncer on the door. And I'd just gone out with a group of friends for the night. And it's quite funny, really, because I'd told my close friend that he was quite nice. And she went and told him.
Just doing my job, and I was approached by somebody and said, right, there's a young lady that wants to have a chat with you, wants to meet you, and I said, okay, fine. I went along, and I actually went to the wrong lady. That's a bit embarrassing, so I'll never live that down, will I?
It was a nice, steady relationship, and even though with the different backgrounds, it worked well. We worked well from day one, really. We got on very well, both as friends and as a proper relationship as well.
By the 80s, the pill and the permissive society meant men and women didn't have to marry to have a sexual relationship. Many loving couples chose to live together, cohabitation instead of marriage. It carried no stigma, and it was easy. And by keeping parents at arm's length, it helped couples from different racial backgrounds.
I had a car, an old Banger, and she helped me transfer my belongings to my bedsit, and I think, she'll disagree with this, but she ends up staying. I'm thinking, hang on a minute. And all of a sudden we started living together, and then it just literally life had just moved on that basis. It just seemed so natural.
My sisters and my brothers all married very early, and unfortunately all their first marriages didn't work, and I think that's probably put me off from settling down too early.
The couple lived together very happily for 4 years when Anne came to a decision.
It came to the point where I wanted to start a family, and that was when we started talking about getting married, and that's the way it progressed, really. I didn't actually have a proposal off him.
So I decided, impulsively, like I always do, I said, all right then, if you want to get married, let's go and get married on Malta. That's what it was. It wasn't a common thing then, but it was actually a way out for us to be able to do our own thing, follow our own convictions, without having to have the problems and the baggage of the two different cultures meeting up at that time. I didn't want to make it any more difficult for us and our respective families, and probably more so my family, who were more traditional.
It was nice for my side of the family because I'd got the ring on my finger and I was a married woman in their eyes. As far as Mo and I were concerned, we'd probably been married 4 years previously as a married couple anyway. So it didn't really change anything. It just didn't really make me feel any different to how I felt when we were originally living together.
In the 1980s, choosing when to marry became much more a matter of individual preference. Surveys revealed women wanted greater emotional intimacy in the marriage relationship. And if it didn't work out, couples got divorced. For the first time in British history, a third of marriages would fail within 15 years. Divorce was now an everyday reality. Clearly, a happy marriage that rested solely on love was hard to make last a lifetime. Guitarist Robert Fripp saw many marriages succumb to infidelity and excess in the hedonistic world of rock music. He enjoyed great success internationally as a solo artist and with his group King Crimson. In 1984, his views on marriage were very clear.
I had a very fulfilling, creative, successful, professional and musical life, and I was very happy as a bachelor. I had no intention of being married, actually rather the reverse. For me, marriage wasn't something I had to do.
In June 1985, Robert arranged to meet Toyah Willcox, herself enjoying phenomenal success as a singer and actor. Their musical worlds were very different, and they'd only met once before.
I asked Toyah if she would help me make a charity record for the charity of which I was then a president in West Virginia for their children's school, and she said yes, and it was while working on that record together. She stole my heart. Powerfully resonant events never go away.
And so I leave it with all of you. Which came out of the open door? The lady or the tiger?
He was known in New York as the red hot lover. I mean, I think he, won't mind me saying, but before he met me, he had as many as 7 women a day because they just made themselves available to him. And then he met me, this complete mess, this utter physical and mental mess, who had had 3 boyfriends, and he accepted who and what I was. It's funny, thinking about it now, I really was incredibly in love with him quite quickly. But it was a very different kind of love because we talked so deeply and we talked about spirituality as well, which to me is incredibly important. The bond between us was inseparable.
The couple were married in Witchhampton, Dorset on the 16th of May, 1986.
Robert and I, we were shaking like leaves. I mean, we were both thinking, oh no, this is it. You know, it was as hard for me to give up my freedom as it was for him.
I was terrified that to make a commitment to this person that you know is your wife, that you adore, is wonderful, makes you laugh, is fabulous company, all the rest. Nevertheless, to stand in front of this and say, I will spend the rest of my life with this woman that I really don't know very well, and I don't even know her hit records. If I had known the extent of my wife's celebrity, probably I would have been frightened off. I would have been terrified. If I'd seen all her earlier press photos, oh.
The newlyweds were both recording stars, but Robert's career commitments in America meant he returned to New York every 2 weeks. The frequent separation put a huge strain on their marriage from the start.
I didn't find that easy at all. I mean, firstly, you're madly in love with someone. The beginning of the relationship is always a hugely sexual relationship. And I found it very hard to be without him.
I kept going away. And this was very, very hard. To begin with, my little lovey would take me to the airport, drop me off, but then would be in tears as I left, closed the car door. So I would leave with my wife in tears, my wife would go home without me.
Robert played gigs across America and ran guitar craft classes in West Virginia. Far away from Toyah, there were many opportunities for affairs.
When Robert went away, I do not believe for 1 minute he was faithful to me. He absolutely swears he was, but no, I don't believe he ever was faithful to me.
For me, when I proposed to Toyah, if I'd had any doubts at all of fidelity, I wouldn't have proposed. I think for my wife, who probably couldn't see the commitment I made on the inside, maybe, oh, my husband is going off on the road. She knows the stories of rock groups on the road, all the rest of it. For me, it was never an issue. It was never a matter. If I'd had any doubt at all, I would simply not have proposed.
I could never have said to him, no, you can't go away, you can't travel. He just wouldn't tolerate that. He's a completely free human being. So I was unhappy. I was incredibly insecure. It was not a happy honeymoon period, but I wanted to make it work.
Making a commitment to love one another for the rest of their lives was a sobering moment for any couple, especially in the 80s. There were many marrying whose parents had divorced in the 60s and 70s. Few then realized the lasting effects this could have on some children's personalities. Now these children and their partners would face the consequences a generation later. Kate and Harry Benson, a Navy pilot in the Falklands War, chose a traditional white wedding. But there was a problem in their relationship from the start.
I was very excited about getting married. I'd spent my whole life wanting to be married. I knew he was the right man for me. I was really nervous too, because I knew I had almost everything in Harry. I just didn't have the friendship. I had enough, obviously, because we got together. But I was definitely frightened, nervous that I could be a bit lonely. Really mixed feelings.
My parents split when I was 3. I went to boarding school when I was 7, and the way I dealt with my whole childhood, I had this incredibly privileged childhood, but I found it very difficult to relate to people. I had very few friends, and the result was that when I married Kate, I had no real idea how to relate to her beyond normal conversation. And so there were the odd moments where Kate got very frustrated with me because I seemed to be distant and closed, which of course I was, but clueless about what was going on. And so she'd get very cross, I'd get very confused, I had no idea what was going on. So we had these periodic sort of blow-ups.
Harry Benson left the Navy and the couple moved to the Far East, where he became a partner in a stockbroker firm. By 1991, they were in Bangkok and had started a family, but the deep-seated problem in their marriage remained.
On the outside, we had the best time ever. He joined a company that gave him a wonderful package, which meant that we had a boat to ride around in, we had gyms to gym in, we had all sorts of allowances and everything, so we lived the life of Riley. I had a loyal, loving husband who worked hard, he provided. I could talk to him if I talked about things he was interested in. I didn't often feel that he was particularly interested in me. And yet, the way he showed that he was interested in me was by doing things for me. So he would empty the bins or do the washing up or arrange holidays. I really needed him to spend time with me, and that was the last thing he ever wanted to do. Not because he didn't love me, it isn't the way he's made. He used to say, look, I'm here, aren't I?
I'd settled into the role of provider, and I thought that was my job in life, was to bring in the dosh for the family. And Kate's job was homemaker, primary parent.
We had our second daughter, and I was beginning to struggle now because the having Harry around but not engaging was quite hurtful, actually. And I felt that I was emotionally doing everything and feeling as though I wasn't having any of my emotional needs met. I was feeling lonely at home. I was feeling drained as a mother. You know, when you're just doing with little children, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of physical hard work. And I was pretty lonely, I think.
I just didn't get what she was feeling at any minute. She'd say something and I would take a very functional approach. You know, I'm tired, I feel tired, we'll go to bed then, sort of thing, rather than saying, poor you must have had a hard day, something like that, being aware that there's a feeling behind it. I would just respond by, you know, some practical suggestion, we'll go to sleep. She'd just get hacked off about that because it's obvious, isn't it? I mean, a 3-year-old can figure that one out. So why does she need to be told that by me? And that was the kind of misunderstanding that we had in spades.
Kate and Harry were drifting apart, the problems of poor communication destroying the closeness they once shared. Like so many couples with 2 small children, they were at a vulnerable stage in their marriage. In 1993, there were 180,000 divorces, the highest number ever recorded in British history. The following year, developments in Harry's job meant the family moved to Hong Kong. It was here that Kate became drawn to Christianity and started attending discipling classes. But her involvement took an unexpected turn.
I met somebody. He was an extremely dynamic youth minister. I was absolutely drawn to him. He was showing me things and remembering me and saying, I've just seen this and I thought of you. And I just melted. Nobody had ever, well, Harry never did that to me. No, nor could I ever see that ever happening, that kind of attention, thought. I told Harry that I was struggling because I'd met somebody. He just asked a very simple question, which was the most dreadful question. He just said, are you sleeping with him? And I said, no. And he said, well, what's the problem then? My heart was now involved with somebody else, and my heart was breaking. Because I felt that this person was going to be able to love me in a way that I'd never, ever get from Harry. And I really wanted to be loved. And I knew it was completely wrong. I had 2 little girls. I just was so stuck, but I knew it was wrong. I had to tell him, so I told him face to face that it was over. I just was extremely matter-of-fact about it, biting my lip because it was just hell. I just said we couldn't see each other again, that it was over. It was horrible. I was just so gutted about it. I was utterly heartbroken. I had to treat this guy as if he'd died. I made a decision that I wasn't going to do what I wanted to do in order to do what was right. So I had to treat him as if he'd died. So I had to grieve, basically.
In Britain, there was a different kind of grieving. Many once proud manufacturing industries were victims of an unforgiving global economy. Male breadwinners in working-class communities had to face the fact that their wives often had a better chance of employment. In 1994, Swanhunter Shipyard in Newcastle was one of the last big manufacturing companies to go into receivership. Electrician Jimmy Warne lost his job along with hundreds of others. Although his wife's job was secure and Jimmy looked after their son, their 6-year-old marriage was falling apart. His story was emblematic of a generation of working-class men.
I think I was ill-prepared for marriage. I think I fell into it. I think that it was seen as a normal thing to do. You know, that was part of the culture, the working-class culture. You served your time, you became a tradesman, you met somebody, you got married. Most men, the overwhelming majority of men, went to work. And in the shipyard, it was very rare that you saw a woman on the shop floor. That was the perceived wisdom. Men went to work. If anybody was going to stay home and look after their children, it would traditionally be the woman. Becoming a shop steward was a natural thing to me because I wanted to help people. Those kind of things were very much of interest to me because I wanted to see fair play. When the shipyard went into receivership, I became actively involved in the campaign committee to keep the shipyard open.
The campaign failed, and so too did Jimmy's marriage. After the divorce in 1995, he lost his role as principal carer of his son.
The main thing that really hurt me at the time was the fact I was losing a day-to-day contact with James. All right, I might not see him all day, every day, but to lose that daily contact with him, not see him in the morning, I not see him at night, I not see him at some point during that day, that had a very deep effect upon me. Some of the early days were very, very difficult for me because I was riddled with angst. I was riddled with turmoil, mental turmoil, trying to come to terms with who I was and what I thought and why I was the way I was. But as I got through that after the first 6 to 9 to 12 months, and I started to realise, for all my faults, you know, you might just be a half-decent person here. And by the end of 4 years, I think I was a much better person, a much more rounded person.
In the 1990s, there was a growing trend for women to marry for the first time in their late 30s or 40s. For many, this was a career choice. They worked hard to build up their financial independence, but never lost their desire for love and marriage with Mr. Right. Lynn Warne has long enjoyed a career as a chiropodist. At the age of 39, though, marriage eluded her. Deep down, she feared time was running out for her dream of a loving husband and children.
I was just so independent. I could be anything I wanted to be, do anything I wanted to do. And I holidayed and partied, and I got my own home, my own cars, and it was like everybody who I met, they must have thought, well, I was a hard woman. I don't think I ever lost the faith of love and marriage. It was the case of, well, when will it happen? Yes, you used to think, oh, nobody wants me, but because I'm sentimental and it'll happen when it happens. But then it gets to the fact of you're getting older in life.
Historically, many mining families knew one another within the close communities of Newcastle. Jimmy Warne's father, James, had been a guest at the wedding of Lynn's parents, Pamela and Henry Todd, in 1960. Nearly 40 years later, Pamela thought it time she played matchmaker for her daughter.
It was my mum who sort of like said, well, I'll get Jimmy over for to help you sort your flat out, for to fix electricity. And I says, well, he's too busy with his union stuff, you know, what are you asking him for? My mum says, oh, I think he'd help you. Then Jimmy came over and fixed me flat and everything.
She was bringing me home one night, and I just said to her, do you mind if I complicate your life? And she looked at me and she said, well, aye, all right. I said, well, would you come up for a drink with me one night? And she said, yes.
And I said, well, I've got nothing in my life that could complicate, but since then, it's been complicated. We just started talking and we started really bonding, and yeah, I felt like I do want him. I knew he was right for me. I just did. Even though I hadn't thought about getting married, I just knew he was right for me.
The couple lived together for a year when Jimmy came to a decision. He was ready to try marriage again. But Lynn was struggling with her emotions now that her long-hoped-for dream could become a reality.
It was more of a problem for Lynn than it ever was for me, by the way. I was settled in the view that I wanted to marry her. We were comfortable with each other. We were happy enough with each other. So let's just say, right, that we're now at the stage where what we want to do is say, if there's just a reserve sticker on us two, right, and we're keeping a foot in both camps, right, just in case something better comes along, let's decide we're not going to do that. And I think the final realisation for Lynn was when I got down on one knee and presented her with that ring, is this guy's serious. This guy's not mucking about. This guy's committed to this and he wants this.
He did the romantic thing and got down on one knee and presented us with the ring, and I had to run out. I had to run away a little bit. I jumped in my car and drove away for about 5-10 minutes because I thought, oh my God, this is it. This is the marriage thing. I'm going to get married. I'm going to get married to Jimmy Ward. And it was everything all come together. So I stopped crying. And I come home and I said, yes, I want to marry you. I want to marry you.
Somewhere in a city where the air is still, a baby being born to the overkill. Well, who cares what people say? We walk down love's motorway, ambition of love, wearing boxes.
Jimmy and Lynn chose to have their wedding in Sri Lanka. Although they'd both been brought up in the Catholic Church, they were married in a Buddhist ceremony, attended by just a few close friends.
It was a wonderful time. I got married, there was only 6 of us there. I didn't feel stressed about it. I remember Jimmy Craig, he was my best man, walking us along the road. I could turn left and go to the bar, or turn right and go to the wedding ceremony, and he stopped me at this point and said, it's your last chance. And I said, no, come on, I'm waiting. I just found the whole experience of getting married in Sri Lanka and the way it was done by the Buddhists was a fabulous, fabulous thing to do.
It was just so emotional and loving, and everybody was happy. It was just so free-spirited and just so spiritual and loving and kind. There was a ride on an elephant, Monica. On this elephant, Jimmy wasn't very happy, but I made him get up. I tell my girls now, you know, Mummy has an elephant on her wedding day, and the kids are like, Mother, you know, get a life. But, you know, I just want them to see how different it can be if you love somebody and you can just have anything that you want, really, if you're happy and in love with the right one.
For many, there would be no happy ending. The high rate of marital breakdown reflected couples' deep dissatisfaction with their long-term relationships. Even those with strong Christian religious beliefs and the clergy themselves were affected. Here in Ovenden, near Halifax, St George's Church was long a place of work for Vicar David Robertson. He has returned to the vicarage family home, where in 1998 he'd been married for 17 years and played a major role in bringing up his 4 children while his wife worked as an English teacher.
When my wife left, it was totally unexpected. I had known that we were going through a difficult place, but we'd been through difficult places before, and we'd come through them. It was a total surprise. I remember the children crying. I remember us being together and my wife no longer there. And they wanted to know why, and I had nothing to say because I didn't know why. The early stages of it were just a bereavement. There's no other word for it. It was a bereavement. My experience was that when the going got tough, God just held me. I continued as a father, I continued as a lone parent, I continued as a vicar, I continued in my responsibilities. I carried on, and that strength that was God holding me allowed me to be what I needed to be for all those people.
David's marriage formally ended in divorce. As a Church of England vicar, during 2 decades of unprecedented marital breakdown, he had often counselled divorced men and women. Now he needed to decide if his faith in the sanctity of marriage allowed him to consider remarrying one day.
I believe that marriage ultimately is one man, one woman for life. But I also recognise that life isn't like that for everybody. In my own situation, I needed to think through the issues of my own divorce and to think through whether it might be appropriate for me to even consider a new relationship.
David has recently become the vicar at Christ Church in Ossett, Yorkshire.
So we can still go. So let's
Following his divorce, he decided that remarriage was a possibility for him. After a while of hoping to find a new love within his local community, he felt the only way to meet someone would be through a Christian introduction agency.
I know that introduction agencies and dating agencies are supposed to be new, but in my thinking they were as old as time itself, because cultures across the world and across history have had matchmakers and relationships have been arranged. And I thought, well, this is just a modern reinvention of a very old wheel. Take people through it.
David met Jill through the Friends First introduction agency. She was a Christian youth worker living in Worcester, age 45, and never been married.
I'd always thought that I would meet the person that I would marry in the course of my life, that either at church or through work or whatever, I would meet that person, and I just never did. And it took me quite a long time to come round to the point of view that I could do something about it.
Jill signed up to Friends First and started sifting through the men's profiles. It wasn't long before she spotted David's.
I was just interested by what he said about himself. His background is also musical, and my background's musical. And I just thought there might be a connection, and it said he was a vicar in West Yorkshire. So I sent him an email, and he replied very quickly. Oh, this is good, somebody who replies.
Just 3 emails, and 8 days later, they were meeting for the first time. The venue, a cafe in Holmes Chapel. Neither realised it was St. Valentine's Day.
I was just full of butterflies and not knowing what was going to happen, and felt very self-conscious and nervous about what was going to happen. And I got to the car park before he did, and he got out of the car, and I thought, I'm sure that's him. And he came towards me, and I thought, no, I don't think so.
We met, and as soon as we got to talk to one another, we both of us thought, this will only ever be a friendship.
David and Jill continued to get to know one another as friends. But by the autumn, Jill's feelings for him were changing into love.
We went out for a meal in the evening to a really nice pub, and I said to him, actually, I've begun to think I'd like there to be a bit more to our friendship. And David was completely dropped on, because he just thought of me as a really good friend. And the next morning, the atmosphere was really fraught, and we were both trying to be normal. And when we got back and had some lunch and sat outside, and I thought, I can't do this in this atmosphere anymore. And I went in and sat down and started to cry.
It was when I saw Jill in tears that I knew that it was a crossroads moment. I needed to think about how I felt. With my first wife, we had a 4-year courtship and a 17-year marriage. So we were part of one another's lives for 21 years. And it was only really when the friendship with Jill began to develop that I realised I wasn't as ready for another relationship as I'd thought I was. And there were issues in there of trust that I needed to face up to. And Jill was very patient with me while I worked through all the things that I still needed to work through before I was ready to say to her, I love you.
Jill and David have returned to St George's in Ovenden. Here at their wedding, many of those present were from the congregation, thrilled that their vicar was marrying again.
David has a very special look that he only uses on particular occasions. And he looked at me with that look when we were making our vows to each other. Knowing that that was how he felt about me is a very special memory.
There was a real atmosphere of expectancy, and it was a good day. Good.
The wedding was a special day for David's children as well.
Joel and Hannah, they were still at home when we got married. And David was very clear all along that they didn't need a mum. He wasn't looking for somebody to be another mother for his children. And I got on really, really well with them. And it was a great blessing to be part of a family, not just part of... I mean, I think a couple is a family, but to have young people around and be involved in their lives as well was a really special thing.
From the 1990s onwards, couples turned increasingly to outside help with their marriages. Many attended counselling sessions and courses to try to solve deep-seated problems. At her home in Somerset, Kate Benson is writing a letter, reliving a moment in her marriage in 1995. She had turned down the love of another man for the sake of her commitment to her husband, Harry. In despair, she wrote to him about her feelings.
I wrote Harry a letter. It was actually a job description of being married to Harry, because it had got so bad for so long that I just viewed it as a job. And I wanted to write down what the job entailed. You know, the hours, the work, the perks, the pay. Because I didn't feel as though I was getting love and appreciation. I think I said, you've got a 6 months or a year to do something about this, or I'm going.
And I thought, blimey. And I suddenly realised this was an utterly key moment. I got down on my knees to Kate. And for the second time in our marriage, the first time was when I proposed. So I got down on my knees again and I said, look, you've got no reason to believe that I will change, but I'm going to. And I know in my head that moment was utterly seminal because I made a decision in my head. I shifted my attitude and I realised that I need to make this marriage work for Kate.
After nearly 9 years of marriage, this was make or break time for Kate and Harry. They decided to take a Christian marriage course in Taiwan.
We had this massive breakthrough where we wrote these very long letters to one another and talked to each other on a level where I discovered that I could really understand what it was like to be Kate. And that was a real moment of emotional intimacy. And for me, this was almost the time that I fell in love with Kate for the first time. It was wonderful. And it revolutionised our marriage from that moment on.
God, I felt really loved by Harry. He was opening up and writing letters to me, saying things that he'd never said before. I think something happened where he felt love to the person that he was married to. And so I, as a result, felt loved for the first time. I got a husband that was going to be faithful, good and intelligent and all the things that I wanted from my man, but he actually loved me as well. And I wanted to celebrate that, so I gave him a wedding ring. And I put the date of that Taiwanese marriage course into the wedding ring because that was the first time that I felt loved.
Before the age of divorce, marriages had been sustained by social convention, stigma, and lower expectations. Now, marriage was less an institution and more a relationship, where issues that maintained long-term love mattered most. With divorce such an easy option, it was more difficult than ever for couples to get through the hard times. Many found they had to constantly work at their marriages to keep the magic alive. Robert Fripp toured the world as a highly respected guitarist, while Toyah Willcox widened her career as a presenter on British television. When a husband and wife worked far apart for weeks at a time, though, love might seem a distant memory.
We were both very busy. I would call every day, very high telephone bills. And my rule would be, focus in on little T, be a happy, happy husband so that I could give whatever is possible to my wife, knowing that she'll be missing me as I'm missing her. It was a quiet, ongoing form of heartbreak. Now, a good disciplined player can deal with it. And as a good disciplined player, I did. When you walk on stage, you're present on stage. You're nowhere else, your attention is there. But when you walk off stage, then I miss my wife. When you get on the bus, I miss my wife. When you get off the bus into your lonely vacuum with a bed in it known as your hotel room, I miss my wife. On stage, a present. That's doable.
He'd start to be away 3 months at a time, and that was just so difficult. And I remember one time, he'd been away for 3 months, he was flying back, got to Heathrow and got a call to go back to Seattle, and he went straight back. I didn't even see him. And that was hell. It was real hell. But when we were together, it was fantastic. You know, we really made the most of it. It was like a honeymoon all the time.
For some couples, the challenge of being apart came from very long days at work. With Britain in the 90s working some of the longest hours in Europe, the support and sacrifice of a partner could be essential to the survival of the marriage. Mo and Anne Chowdhury are at their home in Staffordshire. During the early years of their marriage, Mo spent most of his time building up his property investment company in Hanley, Stoke-on-Trent.
And realized very early on that we had to get on in life. Not once did she say to me, this is not going to work because you're working all the hours. She knew it was a means to an end. So she was very, very supportive of that. She gave me a home, she gave me a stability in my life, a platform from which I could unleash myself. So on the business side, I drove it. On the home maternal side, she drove it.
The potteries industry was in decline during the 1990s, when Mo Chowdhury became a local rags-to-riches success story, culminating with his revitalization of Waterworld. After bringing up their 3 children, Anne started to work with Mo, becoming a director in 1998. She had her own special way of dealing with a driven, work-obsessed man with a fiery temper.
Oh yeah, all right. So have you had the information through from the agents yet?
Yes. Mo's very vocal. If things aren't the way he thinks they should be, But both of us, being the way we are, we tend to say there and then, look, you know, this isn't right. We need to sort it out. We've had a few fallouts where we've not spoken for a few days, but to be honest, it's normally me that makes the peace, as usual. I think the women are always like that. If he's wrong in any way, he's very good at apologising. But if he isn't wrong, he's very good at not apologising.
I've got a very short fuse. I have my tantrums, rant and rave, and say all sorts of wrong things sometimes. And then we just sleep on it. We kind of ignore each other for a few days, and then slowly but surely, you know, we're back on even keel again. But the key thing has always been that there's been something that's kept us together, always.
Stuck on you, got this feeling down deep in my soul that
We certainly wouldn't be married if it wasn't for Anne. I mean, you know, she's the glue. She's kept it all together, and she's kept me in check in the nicest possible way.
It's just life. It's our lives. It's the whole of our lives, and I wouldn't want it any other way.
In Britain, attitudes have changed greatly since Mo and Anne Chowdhury's wedding 25 years ago.
Oh, woo! God, that's got a pop in it, isn't it? At the time that Anne and I married, at the time we settled down, it wasn't a done thing for a mixed-race marriage, particularly an Asian mixed-race marriage. And I feel very proud of the fact that I did follow my own instincts. And you can marry outside your own culture and your own ethnicity. And despite all those issues, if both parties are minded to, and you mold together, then you can have a very nice, happy life together. Well, happy anniversary, dear. Oh, here's to the next 25 years. Yeah. Cheers.
So what do you want to have?
Harry and Kate Benson returned to England in the late 1990s. After their marriage crisis, they went on to have another 4 children and have now celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. Inspired by the insights that saved his own marriage, Harry devised and ran new marriage counselling courses, helped by Kate.
26 years ago.
Do you know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of standing in the reception room and not getting any food at all.
Their passion is to pass on their own intimate understanding of married love.
My love for Kate is a really strong, deep, inner sense of connection and a deep care for her. And that really starts from this fundamental thing about marriage, which is about this decision that I've made somewhere inside me that we are married for life. That's the point. That's the whole deal. And so although I don't always feel the great sort of gushy emotional stuff and mad, passionate love, I've got this terribly strong, warm, deep, content feeling of care for my other half. And she is very much my other half.
I'm totally happily married. I know my husband loves me. I know I love him. And yet we can still have really, really bad times. We can have some nasty arguments, we can hurt each other, we can go through bad and dry patches, but we recognise them. I think that a really good marriage has to be worked at.
Toyah Willcox is working in her office at the couple's home in Pershore, Worcestershire. She and Robert have been married for 26 years. Their decision not to have children enabled them to devote what little free time they had to each other.
In the early years, I expected that my wife might in some way contribute to the quality of my life. In other words, I had an anticipation that my wife would make my life better. Well, clearly she has and does. But as I got older, I saw that that imposed a limitation, a constraint on the marriage. So as my acceptance of who and what Toyah is, my little lovey, deepened, for me, my prayer is, may I be the husband that my wife needs.
He got the picture of what marriage meant to me, and marriage was a totalness. I wanted to be with him totally, and I wanted to be with him when he was working and be with him socially. he had to compromise. And I compromised hugely. Marriage, it's a bond, it's a spiritual bond where you grow together and you can grow apart, but you grow together again. And it is always challenging, but those challenges are hugely rewarding and enriching.
Toast.
How about to Willy Fred, the Prince of Rabbits? Willy Fred, the Prince of Rabbits.
Cheers, Bunny.
David and Jill Robertson are returning to the very same park bench where he proposed to her. They're both clear that their decision to marry brought out the best in one another.
I believe that there's more than one kind of love. I think there's romantic love, I think there's friendship love, but if the love that wants the very best for the other person is always present, then it means that the relationship is always going deeper. And after 7.5 years of marriage with Jill, I would say that I love her more now than I ever have before.
I have done a lot of things that I am really proud of, but loving David is the best thing that I have ever done because it has helped him to be himself as well as helped me to be myself. It is about becoming one with somebody, yes, in a physical sense, but also in a spiritual sense.
This is where Mummy used to live. Mummy? Yes, Mummy used to say Nana.
Lynn and Jimmy Warren are taking their children back to Wallsend in Newcastle to show them where they grew up. Jimmy has no doubts about his choice to marry again.
If you haven't given it serious consideration before you even think about taking the first step from being single to wanting to be married again or have a relationship, you've got to want to do it. And you've got to want to commit to it. And if you don't commit to it completely and utterly, there's no point in doing it. You've got to commit with your heart and your soul, and if you don't, there's absolutely no point because you're holding back.
Loving Jimmy means to me the fact that I've always got my soulmate. And I don't think I could envision anything without him. I might be an independent person, but he's my other half.
It's not about graphic terms of how much you love that person. It's how comfortable you are with them, how safe you feel with them, how secure you are with them. It's those things that are important because that, I mean, how do you actually describe love? What is it? You know? How does it manifest itself? Well, I think it manifests itself in your honesty, in your decency towards that person. That's what love is.
The social changes that transformed life in Britain during the late 20th century put enormous strain on the old institution of marriage. Couples struggled as never before to hold on to romance. Those who succeeded found that marriage in the age of divorce can still bring a deep and lasting love.